This is the Puck Junk Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Puck Junk Hockey Podcast. I'm Sal Barry, and with me today is Clemente Lisi, and we're going to talk about a few topics of things going on in the world of hockey and in collecting. We're going to talk about the new Professional Women's Hockey League logos that were just released. We're going to talk about a new book by a former NHL coach. We're going to talk about the NHLPA Showcase and a couple other things. Clemente, how have you been?
Good. We're entering a busy time, I think, for everybody back to school, and we're also in the healthiest sports time of the season. You have the playoffs in baseball coming soon. The NHL will start up soon. NBA will start up. So it's just busy for all of us who cover sports or write about the hobby, and a lot going on in our personal lives. So yeah, I'm just been very busy. I know you're very busy as well. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of actually glad that you guys could not do a podcast on Labor Day or like around there. You and Tim were both like, "Yeah, we're busy." I'm like, "Okay, that's fine." It kind of took the pressure off of me. But then it was just as well because, I started teaching last week. You started teaching last week. And so, yeah, that first week of school is always like just super busy, and problems just always seem to crop up when you're not expecting them or whatever. So, yeah, just having that extra time uh, where it wasn't like, oh, I got to get this podcast up by Friday. Oh, I got to find some cards that we're going to put, in the blog post for the podcast or whatever, right? Like it was okay. Like, I think actually it's really healthy to say, we're not going to do a show this week or like around Christmas. We're just like, I think you and Tim were like, oh, let's just not do one until January. You know what I mean? Like, okay, fine. Yeah, we'll take 2 weeks off. That's cool.
you need to recharge the batteries too, because otherwise and the content is like a feeding the beast kind of thing all the time. But you want to do quality sometimes, not just quantity. And so don't get me wrong, I have podcasts I listen to that when they're like doesn't show up in my my feed like when it's supposed to, I'm kind of like, oh, I was looking forward to that. But at the same time, I think people understand that everyone needs a break, and Labor Day is kind of like the last hurrah of summer. And I kind of consider, the end of Labor Day, not just the end of summer, but also kind of the beginning of the hockey season, because you have, as you mentioned, the NHL Rookie Showcase, you have MVP comes out. So the weather's getting a little cooler in the part of the Northeast, and I'm sure in the Midwest. So, we're almost there, in a month's time, we're going to be in the middle of the beginning of the hockey season. So.
What's crazy was like the day before we recorded this, it was like low 60s, and like today it's like mid 90s.
Well, that's the thing. You get this crazy ups and downs until it settles in. And I love warm weather, but too much of a good thing also gets tiring, and you kind of, you're looking forward. I'm not gonna miss sweating a lot either. Especially when you're in the city. When you're on vacation, it's at the beach is great, but you're in Chicago. I'm in New York. Walking around big cities in the heat is just not a lot of fun. So
No, and the cities tend to smell worse in the heat.
yeah, I'll take a nice rainstorm and 60 degrees, about now. So clean things up.
So one thing that happened while we were on hiatus that I feel like we have to address is the tragic deaths of NHL player Johnny Gaudreau and his brother Matthew Gaudreau, who were both killed by a drunk driver on August 29th. They were in town, in their hometown, visiting for their sister's wedding. The two brothers went out on a bike ride in the evening, and they were killed by a motorist who was intoxicated, so from what I read, it sounds like he was trying to make an illegal lane change and go around another car and hit them. And the other car that he was trying to go around was actually doing the right thing by giving the cyclists more room, like the way that. So it's like the one motorist was doing the right thing when he saw the cyclists, and the other motorist was doing the very wrong thing, and it resulted in the deaths of these two hockey players. And And yeah, it's really sad. I mean, and I said this in my newsletter a couple weeks back, but it's just like when a hockey player that you might have watched or you might have heard of dies and they're really old, you go, that's sad. You go, that's sad. But then you might also say, but they were 96, you know what I mean? And they died of natural causes, surrounded by friends and family, blah, 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 right? When somebody dies before their time, it's tragic. You look at someone like, say, like Mike Bossy or Guy Lafleur. I mean, those guys were long retired, but they died of cancer, right? So you go, wow, that's tragic. But then when somebody dies in an accident that's like totally preventable, it's not just tragic. I find it also infuriating, right? Like it's sad, but it also kind of makes me angry because this was like 100% preventable. And I'm not trying to make the podcast about that aspect of it, but that was just kind of like what was going through my mind.
Yeah, no, saying it was a tragedy is really an understatement. It's one of those stories, a few in my life that I've interacted with, read about, that felt like the tragedy kept getting bigger the more I read. Which was, yes, they died, they were killed, and by a drunk driver. But then you find out they're there for the sister's wedding. They're the groomsmen. Then you find out that his wife is pregnant. And just keeps going. It just kept getting more and more. And then you start to think, like, how does a family ever come to grips with that? And so that was something that I thought about for a few days, and it was over Labor Day weekend, so I had time to marinate in it a little bit. And I do agree, I did get upset, and if the one positive can come out of this is, I think as a society we need to sort of rethink and also re-educate people on drunk driving. When we were growing up, Sal, there was a big push, PSA announcements to stop drunk driving. And I think that we thought we solved that problem as a society. And clearly we haven't, because, and unfortunately, maybe it takes a high profile death to tell people, look, drunk driving is wrong. You shouldn't do it. It took out these two young men in the prime of their life, and it's because we know these people. We know Gaudreau because he's an NHL star, but this happens all the time, to people we don't know, and they may be, only a few lines in the newspaper, as opposed to, this was page one news around the world even. And I ended up going to a Red Bulls Philadelphia Union MLS game that weekend, and it was in New Jersey, and so they did a moment of silence, and it felt like every sporting event in the country did this. And people told me this was like, to them it was like Thurman Munson or Roberto Clemente. It was an athlete in their prime who just tragically is killed, in this case with his brother. And so that's something that really is terrible, and I hope something good can come of it. I want to add this piece of it that's hobby related, that bothers me. And I understand that card prices go up when a player hits a home run or someone gets inducted in the Hall of Fame, and you see prices of their cards or autographs shoot up. But when you see the same thing happening, like in this case, I noticed within days that Gaudreau's Young Guns card was like skyrocketing in price. That kind of bothered me, and I'm thinking, like, I understand this is a business and people want to buy and sell and they want to be part of the story somehow, but suddenly to decide to jump on this, and for people to you know raise their prices, even, or for people to want to spend more money on something because it's going to come right back down. And I don't know what it is, human nature, to be part of this story somehow, or because they think he's in the news, it's going to be worth more now that he's dead. And that kind of bothers me. It happens with older players. It happens, but that's like you mentioned. If someone dies at 75 years old, it's different. So that kind of bothered me that there was this kind of run on his Young Guns card, for example, or his like rookie patch auto, whatever rookie year cards. So that kind of bothered me. I don't know where the prices are now, but in the aftermath of it, like over Labor Day weekend, they were climbing in price, and that kind of, I don't know if you noticed the same thing, but that kind of annoyed me. And I don't know who to blame, whether it's the sellers or the buyers or maybe both, but it's something I noticed that happened right soon after.
Yeah, I don't know who to blame. That's an interesting question. I've never thought of it that way. I've always just thought, well, when a seller is selling something after somebody dies, it's like you're capitalizing on their death, and that to me always seemed kind of scummy. But at the same time, and I'm not going to give the whole angle, well, the seller needs to make money or wants to make money, whatever. If people want the thing and you have the thing to sell, then are you doing them a service? Again, I'm not trying to see both sides of it here. I guess the thing is like it's almost like the best thing you can do is just not sell it and then wait, and then just sell it when like maybe the interest has dissipated because the person's passing is long gone. You know what I mean? Like, I don't really have a strong opinion. I mean, I would see that, when a player would die, and I'd look up and I'd say, oh yeah, now this thing that was $10, people want to get $100 for it. What a bunch of jerks or whatever. Whatever. There's some sort of like there should maybe, I don't want to say a guideline, but yeah, I could see where there's like, you look at that, you go like they're gouging. But like, I'll give you like another for instance. Bobby Hull died, and I had some autographed items of Hull, and I had them in my cases when I was at shows when he was alive, and when he had passed away, I didn't remove them from my cases, but I also didn't mark up the prices either. Like, I didn't say, "Oh, Bobby Hull is dead, so people are going to want his autograph more, so now I'm going to, add $40 to it or whatever." You know what I mean? Like, that didn't even cross my mind to do that. It was just kind of like, he's a popular player, people want his autograph regardless. And so I never thought to like take it out of the case, if that makes sense. But at the same time, I never thought about like jacking up the price.
And I should add that I'm not sure that the price was jacked up. All I can tell you is that there might have been more bidders, and that drives the price up too. I understand that, but just even the amount of Gaudreau items were popping up now that you normally wouldn't see, or maybe I wouldn't even be looking for his stuff unless I'm a Blue Jackets fan or something. It's just an interesting observation, something that I think happens pretty routinely when someone dies or is in the Hall of Fame inducted or something, a big event. It's just a tragedy that I just thought this was a unique category that maybe it doesn't facilitate the need to drive up prices. And I understand it's human nature. It's also free market, supply and demand. I get all that, but it just personally, I wouldn't, if I own Gaudreau items, I wouldn't put them up for sale or double the price. I wouldn't do any of those things. And people might say, well, maybe you would. I go, no, I wouldn't do that because it's price is going to come right back down. So for the seller, it's a quick buck, but for the people buying it, it's not going to hold its value. It's worth whatever it's worth, and that's it. If you really want his stuff, I get it. But if you really want his stuff, you would have been buying it when he was alive too. So I don't know, but just something that was sort of the hobby part of this whole tragedy. And now that we're basically more than a week past it, and they had the funeral for him as both brothers on Monday, and it was just I think it's going to resonate over the course of the NHL season. I think the Blue Jackets have suffered tragedy in the past, so who knows what that'll do for their season and just going into the whole thing. It's just a tragedy, and I just hope something good can come of it, which I think is the more education on drunk driving. But that's the bottom line, I think.
Right. Oh, well said. Moving on, one piece of news that came out earlier this week that I think is interesting is the long-awaited unveiling of the logos for the Professional Women's Hockey League's 6 teams. They're calling them the Inaugural Six. So when the league launched a year ago, they were just Boston Hockey Club, Minnesota Hockey Club, Montreal, New York, Ottawa, Toronto, right? Hockey Club, right? They didn't have names. They didn't have official team identities. People kind of made fun because they kind of looked like they had beer league jerseys that just had like the team name on them or whatever. But at the same time, I totally understood what they were doing. They're just like, look, we need to start this league. We need to get this off the ground in a hurry because, I mean, we've had competing women's hockey leagues. And then now that there was no hockey league, the time was right to get the players, the union, the women's player union, everybody on the same page. They started this league. And they weren't getting too caught up in the details. Like, well, what should we call the Toronto team? Who cares? We just know that Toronto needs to have a team. Let's get a league. Let's get a rink. Let's get our players. Let's start going. You know what I mean? And that's what they did. And then they took their time. They developed the logos and they came up with the names. So I'm going to read off these names really quick, and then we could talk about what we think about them. We got the Boston Fleet, the Minnesota Frost, the Montreal Victory, the New York Sirens, the Ottawa Charge, and the Toronto Scepters. So we got some singular names. We got some plural names. So half of these could be soccer teams. Ha ha.
Yeah, no, I don't dislike the names. I understand that There's been so many professional sports leagues in American history that I get it. At some point, you're gonna either repeat names or you're gonna leave names out. I mean, it's hard to be original. I get it. I think my favorite one here is the Frost. I kind of like that one, honestly. The Sirens, I thought is interesting. I When I first saw the name, I thought, oh, they mean like sirens, like
From the
mermaid, like
mythology, yes, that's what I was
yeah,
thinking.
not like, oh, a hockey siren. Then I read the description. It's like, no, it's like the New York, like a police siren. I thought, well, that's getting weird. Like, I like the names if I can impose my own meaning to them. But if I read the descriptions of why they're named that, I kind of get like the Boston Fleet. It's like, oh, it's an homage to our history of maritime sailing. I'm like, oh boy, like I don't know that I like that, and so I'm more interested in maybe the way the jerseys look, the logos, and maybe they'll grow on me. But ultimately, I don't know, and it'll matter based on like the look. The look is a bigger deal than the actual names. I applaud them for waiting the year, but when you wait the year, then you expect the names to be even better. It's like, oh, you've had a year to think about this, and this is what they came up with. So it's kind of and I beat up on team names because the plural versus the singular is definitely a thing. Like, I don't know. There should be some kind of baseline. Like, we're going to be plural. We're not going to be singular. Now, Frost. I guess Frost is singular, but there's no plural for Frost. I mean, just it's a
It's
thing that
frost,
happens,
yeah,
right?
whether yeah.
Frost. It's like snow. It's like not snows or
Right,
whatever.
yeah.
It's snow. It's a thing. So a thing is okay. It's and sirens is plural. Like, now it could have been the New York Siren, and that would have been okay too, or equally weird. Like, I don't know, but I guess there is really no rule on names. I guess they don't have to be plural. I favor the plural ones generally, unless it's a condition, like a weather condition. Then, like storm, then it's like, well, that's going to be just a thing, and that's not a singular or plural. That's just a thing. But I don't know. What's your take on
Yeah,
that?
I'll agree with that. Like, I like just getting into the NHL for a minute. I like the name Colorado Avalanche. I don't know if I liked it 25 years ago when that was what they were going to be called, but I like that name, Colorado Avalanche, right? And Tampa Bay Lightning, right? So there's sometimes where like the singular works fine. It just sounds cool. But when you have like the Seattle Kraken, which has also grown on me, but it's like, we're like, okay, so one singular Kraken, okay, I guess it's a giant monster, but it's just like, I don't know. Like, so to me, it's hit or miss. Like you said, if it's like a force of nature, personally, I like Boston Fleet. Their logo is like a sideways anchor that looks like the letter B, and I think it's awesome. And I would actually wear a Boston Fleet T-shirt because they got like a dark green color.
When I saw that, I thought of Fleet Bank because that used to be a Boston bank.
Hmm.
So I don't know. The logo's cool, but maybe it would have been the Anchors. Now that could be a weird name, right? Or the Boston Anchor.
Anchor,
This one,
right? Yeah,
this would have been equally as annoying.
I like the Montreal Victory logo because it's got like two wings. Like I say like angel wings. I mean, I think it's supposed to be
It's supposed to be the symbol for victory,
like the goddess of
like there
victory,
was
like Nike, the goddess of victory, right? The winged goddess of
right. And that's
victory,
what
right?
yeah, it's what threw me off about the sirens. I'm like, are they going for a mythological theme? And it's like, oh no, we're talking about police sirens because New York is full of crime, or I don't know,
Yeah,
whatever their
they were talking
explanation
the
was.
city siren. They were referring to it as, and I'm like, what? Like,
Well, there's also a siren in hockey when you score a goal. So I'm like, okay, that wouldn't be original to New York. That's every team has that. So if they went the mermaid route, that might be cooler. Though New York doesn't. New York is on the water, but it doesn't have any history of mythology. And also, is it because they're female teams? They're choosing like female oriented. Like victory seems like that could be what they're doing, but I don't know. And then the one I dislike the most is the one called Charge.
not a charge.
I don't like that because that is what, like a lightning bolt? I don't know, I'm guessing.
It's like a letter C or a letter O. At first, I looked at it and I thought it was for a Calgary team. I said, "Oh, that kind of looks like the Calgary Flames logo, but it's like a different C, and it has kind of like lines or whatever on the back of it." You know what I mean? So like, it kind of looked to me like a Calgary Flames like
It also
logo, but it's not.
Yeah, it also sounds like the name of like a high school football team, or even worse, like some like expansion lacrosse team that's gonna be gone in 2 years. Like, oh, here's this like weird name Doesn't matter. We're not going to be around in 2 years anyway, so don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I don't love it, and I guess Chargers is taken by the NFL team, but then don't go in that direction. Just go somewhere totally. Yeah, I like it when they go with an animal, and it's like local somehow
Mm-hmm.
to them. Like, oh yeah, like now San Diego, I don't know what's local to them, but like, but they can Google that and find it. And go, oh yeah, we're gonna call ourselves the what
The
or whatever.
seals. Or
Seals or koalas or whatever, and then that would be cool. I would kinda like that, but they probably mess that up too and call it the koala or seal and make it one. It'd be like, oh, singular, really? So, I don't know, but some of these I like, some of them I don't like, and then the one I guess we should talk about the Toronto one, the Scepters,
yeah.
which sounds also like it's supposed to be regal because of their history, I don't know, being a colony of Great Britain or something, I don't know, whatever
Yeah.
explanation they gave.
Just
It's like
yeah.
it's just really mystical and magical, and I don't know. I'm hoping like the logos are cool. Hope the jerseys are cool, and the names are the names. And the New York team is still going to be New York to me. I probably won't call them the Sirens, or if I do, I'll keep thinking of like the Starbucks logo in my head, maybe. But I don't know.
The Sirens, like when I first heard that name, so okay, I was thinking again of the the creatures from mythology, which are like beautiful women, mermaid who sing the siren song, and they would lure what's the word? Not pirates, not fish,
Like seamen,
seamen, right? Like
yeah,
like the shipments,
like in Ulysses,
yeah,
yeah, like
exactly,
Ulysses.
and then they would kill them, right? And so,
Right,
I mean, I
right,
could see why there'd be like, well, maybe we don't want to name our team, but I was the first I thought, well, that's badass, right? Like that's hardcore. It's like, yeah, we're beautiful ladies, and we will f you up, right? Like we are
right.
not to be messed with, right? So when I heard the name Sirens, I go, okay, that is badass. But they were like the New York City Siren. I'm like, are they talking about like ambulances? Are
Right.
they talking about like
Police
like
cars.
I didn't know what they were talking about. Are they talking about the hurricane warning test that we have at 10 a.m. every Tuesday? I don't know
Yeah,
if they do
right,
that in your
right.
city, but they do it in mine, where they do like a hurricane warning
Yeah,
test.
no, it's like an alert. Yeah, like an alert. And I'm like, and also because of the hockey siren, like that's ubiquitous with all hockey teams.
If it was the New York Sirens and it was just like the silhouette of like the goal light, that would be okay too. But like I remember reading that they were considering adopting the identity, the name, the look, the identity, the logo of the New York Riveters, which I thought would have been badass, right? For those who don't know, it's basically Rosie the Riveter type hockey logo. Awesome. Like just it's such an iconic piece of like American history, kind of like the Statue of Liberty or kind of like, Mount Rushmore, kind of like, the Lincoln Memorial or whatever. Like one of those things that you just know what it is when you see it, right? Even if it's something that's based on it or whatever. So I'm thinking, okay, that would be cool. That would be really cool because that was, I think, hands down the best of the previous league. But I could understand why the new league wouldn't want to have anything from the previous league, like
Connection.
no baggage.
I get it.
They go, oh, that logo. Yeah, we've seen that logo already versus a new logo. It's like, you want to sell jerseys? Change your team logo, change your colors.
No, I get it. That they want to start fresh. I get it.
And if you hate it, you can always do what the Islanders do and change it back after a year. Funny little side note. So I'm referring to the fish sticks logo that the Islanders adopted in 95, 96, and it was so derided. 96, 97, they tried to change it back. And the NHL was like, no, you can't do that because you've already committed to that logo for another year because you missed the deadline. And, it's the logo that's going to be on all the things and whatever. And so then what they did was they rolled out their old logo and wore that for like 20 games during the season or something. You know what I mean? Like, it's our anniversary. So we're going to roll out the old logo for this. And then the next season, they completely got rid of the fisherman. So, yeah.
Yeah. I also call it the Gordon's Fisherman logo. That's what it looked like.
Yeah. So cool. I'm excited about the logos. Oh, they're also, their hockey jerseys should be out by end of October or early November. And there's a set of PWHL hockey cards coming out in the fall. Not sure when. Upper Deck just said in the fall. So I guess that could be as late as December. It's going to be 50 cards. It's going to be pretty limited in scope. And I believe it's got to be a box set for 50 cards.
I hope so. I hope it's not just an e-pack thing.
No, this is going to be physical.
Yeah, they need to be out there, and they need to, and maybe they'll coincide with the start of the season, which I assume this year will be longer than last year.
So moving on, a famous hockey coach that we both know pretty well, which just the timing of this was perfect. We were getting ready to do our show, and I just looked at my email really quick, and I saw this announcement from the publisher, and I go, "Oh man, we got to talk about this, right?" So Mike Keenan, aka Iron Mike Keenan, has an autobiography coming out October 1st from Penguin Random House Books. It is called Iron Mike: My Life Behind the Bench.
I can't wait for the cover art on that.
Well, I can tell you what it is.
Oh, what is it?
It's him raising the Stanley Cup.
Oh, okay.
Got to go with the happiest memory.
Because every bio now, every book written, every autobiography now is a close crop shot of the face.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was going to be Mike Keenan looking like all snarly and upset. Look, the book will definitely be a must read, especially if you're a Blackhawks fan or a Rangers fan, because and he famously won coach the Rangers to the Stanley Cup 30 years ago. But I can't wait for the reaction from all his former players, because that's going to be amazing. And maybe it's no holds bar. Given the title, I think it's going to be, he's at a point in his life where I think he can say, you know what, I'm going to just say it like it is, And look, he's legendary, and he's famous and both infamous, I think, for his style. But he got results. Every player I ever spoke with always had good and bad things to say about him, And so it was interesting. He's kind of a yin yang kind of, and look, sometimes the best coaches are the ones who are going to ride you the hardest. They're not there to be your friend. It's kind of like the Mike Ditka school of coaching. And he's the hockey version of that, where he's a tough, and maybe Mike Keenan can make a second career out of this kind of, and do cameos in movies. I mean, Mike Ditka did this. Mike Ditka has become like a cultural phenomenon, because not just because of his coaching, but things he did afterwards in movies and other things. So I don't know. Maybe, he'll make a cameo in a future Mighty Ducks thing or some, it'll be kind of fun. But I think the book will be very interesting. And I think it's going to be interesting to hear him talk about the book, to read the book. Maybe if there's an audio book and he's doing the reading, I'd get that. Anything that he's going to do around this book will be interesting, because ultimately we want to hear all the stories that we've heard about. And then maybe there's some stuff there that we've never heard before. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think the best is when players tell their Mike Keenan stories, because those are going to be like legit. Maybe a little spin on them, but they're going to be 90% the truth. Like, I know he was coaching in the KHL for a while, and I remember they said he was the most non-Russian coach. Like, the players basically said he's like the most Russian for a non-Russian coach that we've ever had.
The funny part about him being like the most non-Russian is kind of funny, because I think in Russia, all the coaches are probably, hard asses. So no, I'm looking forward to the stories. I hope there's a lot of good stories in there, and not just general stuff. I don't want to get coaching tips from Mike Keenan. I just want to know what what he did as a coach.
What I find funny and interesting is that, like, we both have mostly different perspectives of Mike Keenan. Like, Ranger fans are like, yay, we won a Stanley Cup. And Chicago fans are like, yeah, you pretty much like burnt it all to the ground in Chicago, give or take. I mean, we still had a competitive team, but you know what I mean? Like, traded away Dominic Hasek for Christian Rutu. You ran Dennis Savard out of town, although we got Chris Chelios, so that is arguably one of the best trades the team ever made. But it's just like, he was like so mean and vindictive when he was like a Blackhawk coach. And he probably was too when he was a Rangers coach, but he got the results that you wanted. So I feel like you could overlook all that.
Yeah, I mean, I can, obviously, but I'm looking forward to seeing the book, reading the book, and I hope there's specific stories, because players have told so many stories over the years. It's kind of interesting. I want to kind of hear like his version of some of the bigger stories. But I want to hear some of the more details about the 94 run, because that is interesting, not 30 years later. And also, we live in a much more sensitive time. Like, I think a lot of younger players would not take to being yelled at or berated or whatever. But at the same time, a lot of these guys who complained about him also want to play for him. And so, I think he gets results out of players, and that's what they're there for. They're not there to be friends or have tea. They're there to win trophies. And so he did that in some places.
One thing I want to mention is, and I feel like people forget this, or maybe they don't know this, and that's okay. But Mike Keenan is very accomplished as a coach. He won, he led his team or coached his team to a championship in juniors, like as a coach, and then a Calder Cup when he coached in the AHL, which in turn got him promoted to the NHL. He took the Flyers to the Stanley Cup Finals twice, and they lost to the Oilers. You can't really fault them for that. Losing to the Edmonton Oilers in the 80s was kind of a given, really. So, I mean, and then he brought the Blackhawks. I mean, they made it to the conference finals in 89. They made it to the conference finals in 90. They won the President's Trophy in 91, but lost in the first round. They made it to the Stanley Cup Finals in 92. So, I mean, even in his 4 years as coach, because in 92, 93, he kind of stepped aside as coach so Daryl Sutter could be the coach. So he had a really impressive track record. And then, of course, with the Rangers, coaching them to a Stanley Cup in 94, right? And then, the stuff with like St. Louis was kind of forgettable. I mean, they got Gretzky, but Gretzky didn't want to play for him. And it's like, hey, you got this great player, but he doesn't want to play for your coach. So what do? Well, I guess we let the player go to New York, right? And then he ended up in Vancouver for a couple of years, and those are pretty bad years too. And ask any Canucks fan what they think about that time where Mike Keenan was the coach and Mark Messier was the captain. And they usually don't have very happy memories of those years of the Canucks. So arguably it was kind of downhill after 94. Oh, and then also want to point out that there was the Canada Cup victory in 1987, and there was another Canada Cup victory in 1991. So internationally, Mike Keenan was also very accomplished. So did a lot of good in his career. He wasn't just this crazy guy who yelled at everybody. He got the results, love him or hate him. And he was always entertaining too. I'll tell you two quick stories. One in Chris Chelios's book. Chelios said he was out at a bar with Brett Hull, and they had this rule that like if a coach walked into a bar and players were already there, the coach had to leave because you can't have coaches and players fraternizing at the same bar together. So Hull and Chelios are having beers, and Keenan walks in, and Chelios is like, "Coach, you know the rule." And Keenan's like, "Yeah." And he looked at Brett Hull and he says, "You would never play for me." And Brett Hull looks and goes, "Wouldn't want to." Then just went back to his conversation. That was one story. And another good story from Jeremy Roenick's book. Keenan was so mad at the players, he made them skate back and forth, back and forth, back and forth the lengths of the ice, right? But while he did this, he took a folding chair and he put it at center ice, and he sat at center ice. And so he was watching the players and they were skating by. And then finally, after 10 minutes or whatever, Trent Yawney bumps the chair from behind. I don't know if he knocked Mike Keenan out of the chair, but Mike Keenan looked and shouted, "It's about time you hit someone, Yawney." And then he goes, "Practice is over." And then Michel Goulet says, "Oh, if I knew all that would have taken, I would have hit his chair 10 minutes ago." So, I mean, there are some really funny stories about that, about him as coach, Yeah. So, yeah. Well, you went to Fanatics Fest last month. Fanatics Fest NYC, as they called it.
Right.
And so Fanatics was planning a Fanatics Fest at the end of this month, September 28th and 29th at PNC Park in Pittsburgh, Fanatics Fest Pittsburgh, but it got canceled. And not like they said something bad on social media kind of canceling. Like they canceled the show. Their official statement is, "We don't feel like we had enough time to make this a really great show. We're not in a rush, so we'll do it some other time when we can put in the time and the effort to make it a really kick-in, ball-in, badass show." Paraphrasing, but
right.
That's their official statement. I don't know if I buy that 100%.
So I will preface this by saying I have zero evidence, so I shouldn't probably say any of this, but just from conjecture, from attending, from speaking to people, just from knowing the way they think, I think that the Fanatics Fest NYC was a lot of work. I mean, it was a lot of work, clearly. And I also think they probably didn't make the money they thought they'd make because they spent a lot, because they needed the attention, they needed the advertising, they needed to get, they wanted the event to be big and splashy so that future ones could be branded. And so the Pittsburgh one and then the Orlando one, those were planned well in advance. I wrote about this months ago, and they had thrown those dates and those cities out there. So it's not like a surprise. But I can see how, the only way the Pittsburgh one was going to work was if they were planning that one at the same time as the New York one, because these things take months to plan. You just don't finish one thing and then plan the next one. And I think they were overwhelmed. They have a big staff, but they're all stretched to the limit. When I was there, they were clearly exhausted after the 3 days, and they'd been working on this for 200 days, maybe more.
Right.
And so I do think that maybe they got too ambitious too quickly, and I think they realized, if we're gonna make these a regular thing around the country, we need to spread them out a little more, because we cannot plan all of them. The truth is, Comic Con controls many of them, but they don't control all of them. And then there's other type of sci-fi shows that pop up, but these are all branded Fanatics Fest. They're all run by Fanatics. They're all run by the same team, and you're stretching your staff thin, but also all the grading companies, all the leagues, like they're not used to doing this every month. Like the NHL, MLB, NFL, they're not used to doing these big pop-up activations literally every month. I mean, they're not every 2 months or every 3 months. They're just not used to it. And I think a lot of people might have said, "Look, we can't do this one." And I think they thought, "Oh, the Pittsburgh one isn't like a kick-ass New York type of show. People are going to criticize us. So, you know what? Let's scrap it and let's move it to a future date and let's spread these out more." And look, I spoke to them about the New York one. They're learning. This is a learning thing for them. It's like a pilot thing. They're testing it. What works, what doesn't work. And I think their frequency I think they got too ambitious early. And I think, good for them to realize, you know what, let's put a pause on this one. Let's do the Orlando one later in the year, because I think it would hurt them more to do a bad job than to not do it at all. I think it hurts them more. So in that sense, Pittsburgh will have to wait. Why Pittsburgh and was next, I have no idea, but maybe that's when the ballpark was available. Yeah, a lot of these dates hinge on availability too. It's not just because they love to be in Pittsburgh in October or New York in August. They don't pick those dates. They have to deal with the venues and what dates are available. And so good for them for realizing that they're maybe growing too fast. And I think if they want to grow the events part, that's a whole other industry. That's a whole other sector. And that's very different from printing cards or from doing other things in the hobby or grading cards or whatever. This is a whole other thing. There's companies that just do events. The events for Fanatics is just one piece of a larger pie. And so I do think that they need to be careful and tread lightly, because they had told me Pittsburgh, Orlando, and then I had rumors maybe LA and then London. It was like, okay, guys, like this is, because they were so excited for it and they want to 10x the hobby, but they don't want to wait 5 years to do it. They want to do it all in 1 year. And I think Michael Rubin is a very demanding guy, and he's always go, 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 and he's doesn't sleep, and he's always working, and he's always high energy. But you got to put that aside for a minute and say, okay, what can we do and what can't we do? Because otherwise you're going to crash. Like, you're going to crash your car, or you're going to end up making a lot of mistakes, and you're going to do a very bad job. So you really need to sort of pump the brakes to keep the car analogy going. And I think people around them might have said, we're not going to do a good job. The guy they have who runs their events used to be the Comic-Con guy. So I think he's got experience. He's like, look, we have to really know what we're doing here and do it right. And I think ultimately, I think it's a bit of a black eye to say we're canceling this one, but long term it's probably better than doing a bad job, because if you do a bad job, social media will be unrelenting. Like, they will suffer for it. And so I think they're smart.
It's like when you're in college or post college and you throw a party and everybody comes and you go, oh, this is great. Everybody had fun.
Let's do it again.
Let's throw another party in a month, right? And then people are like, I got plans, you know what I mean? Like, oh, well, we were just at your house last month and and like, what are you going to do differently? And not that like people who want to come and hang out at a party or whatever, like, what are you going to do differently? But that was like something that I realized like out of college, like I was living with my roommates and we would sometimes we'd throw like a party every now and then, but we threw one and it was really good. And like, oh, let's throw another one like a month later or 3 weeks later. And like half as many people came. And I'm like, all right, well, we'll throw another one in a month and then more people will come. And it's like, it was like diminishing returns. You know what I mean? And then it was just like, people have lives, people do other things. I mean, sometimes you could get it where everybody can make it. And the analogy works when you talk about like, say, the Major League Baseball and NFL and NBA and NHL and like the leagues being there, right? Like they were able to do something in the summer because like, yeah, baseball's going on, but football, basketball, hockey not going on. I don't know about soccer, but you get the idea. Like August, a lot of the pro leagues are winter leagues, so August are not doing much. So they could totally set up and do something there. People will travel in the summer. It's a destination, right? New York City, right? I get it, right? But yeah, to do another show like 6 weeks later, so then it's like, okay, well, is this a regional show or is this like a big destination like the New York City one, right? And then they're doing one in Orlando. Is that a big destination or is this a regional one? It's like when Star Wars does its convention celebration, it's once a year. People plan their lives around it, people book their flights a year in advance. Well, because it's Star Wars, right? But they're all in. If they did a Star Wars convention every month, even if it was official, what would be the draw to want to go to more than one? Especially if you could just go to one that's close to you.
Yeah, you're watering it down. You're watering it down, right?
Right. And I think that like one big show a year, people circle it on their calendar. They make it a point to go to it. Or you do two shows a year, one East Coast, one West Coast. Like there's a Transformers convention. They do three shows a year, but they do one in Toronto every year because the promoter's in Toronto. So they do one in Toronto every year, and that makes the Canadian fans happy. And then they do one on the East Coast, and they do one like on the West Coast, or they did one year Midwest. So I don't know if that counted as East Coast or West Coast. But like, so the thing is they do three shows a year, but they're spaced far enough on the map apart that the people who go to one are not necessarily going to go to the other one. Like if Fanatics was maybe doing something on the West Coast, okay. But yeah, I agree. Like they should be worrying about selling subpar baseball jerseys and baseball hats because that's their breadwinner. That's their moneymaker,
Right.
is their merchandise. The shows are great. We love shows, but like you said, they got other things to worry about, not just shows, and there are companies that do nothing but promote shows. Like the company that does the National, that's all they do is the National. That's their business.
Right. Well, the merchandising is what made Fanatics the money and the name that they have. So the event space is a whole other thing. And maybe they're going to realize, you know what? This traveling circus of Fanatics Fest may not be possible. This may only be a 4 times a year show or 2 times a year show, and maybe we rotate cities, but we can't literally have this thing pop up in your town every 6 weeks because the frequency and the quality they're looking for is just not attainable with the employees they have and the staffing level and the planning. And every venue is different, every city is a different headache. And I think they didn't think that through. And frankly, I didn't think it through either. Now that they canceled this one and we're talking about it, I'm realizing, oh yeah, it's ambitious to want to do this on a rolling basis forever. It's like, and that might dilute their jerseys, their trading cards, whatever they're doing. And so I think they have to really sit down and think about it and maybe tell Michael Rubin, like, relax, like, we know you're go and you're an ambitious guy, but it's not humanly possible. Like the people that work for you cannot do this. It's not possible. And I
Right.
think I made this analogy when we spoke about Fanatics Fest a month ago, which was very much one of those bosses who has lots of ideas and it's a spaghetti against the wall type of thing. And some of that stuff is good, but sometimes it's too much. And I think that this is sort of a public admission in some ways of we can't do everything. We have to rethink it, and maybe we have to be sort of more cautious and take more time, and we'll see what evolves from it. I mean, look, I think there's room for this and trade shows and in terms of card shows. But if you think about it, card shows are a lot of work, but they're formulaic. Like the Expo in Toronto happens twice a year in the same venue. They've been doing it forever and ever, and it's set. And then they expand to Montreal and to Edmonton. So they've gotten bigger. The Ohio one, they've gotten bigger, but it's the same venues over and over. So there's repetition, and they know the logistics. And once they do it once, they can figure it out. Fanatics Fest wants to be not just a card show, but they have to have the activations and the celebrities. And I mean, could you get the same celebrities to show up now in Pittsburgh, and then again in Orlando, and then again in
Probably not.
probably not. So they have to rethink everything. I think a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And like speaking of the expo, like even like the expo, there's the Edmonton and Montreal and stuff like that. But those shows are a little bit smaller, from what I understand, a little more regional. So it's okay. Like maybe the Toronto's the one that draws people from all over, and then maybe the Edmonton one just draws people from the province or the region, and that's okay. I mean, it's okay to have like a big thing and then like satellite shows in other places. Not everything can be a big thing. You know what I mean? Like not every card show. Maybe Fanatics could do a big one in New York every year and then branch out and do little ones like here and there. I don't know. Fanatics branded.
I don't know if Fanatics understands what little means. Like
Yeah,
and I think that's part of the problem, that everything's got to be a blowout. So
right, right. It's a good point.
yeah.
All right. So, last thing I wanted to talk about today was lucky you, got to go to the NHLPA Rookie Showcase, where Upper Deck was photographing the new rookies for the 24-25 NHL season. And I assume getting them to sign a bunch of stickers that will be applied to trading cards later on throughout the year. So, what do you want to say about the showcase? And, what are your thoughts? What do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so this is my second year going to the showcase. It takes place in Arlington, Virginia. This is the 14th one they've done, I think, with Upper Deck. I think prior to this, they used to do something similar with Panini. And so, yeah, they basically get all the rookies this year, 35 of them. Some of them brand new, draft picks, guys that got drafted this past year, and then guys who played a small amount of games in the past who are still rookie eligible. And exactly that. They take photos of them on the ice. There's a lot of video shot and a lot of autograph signing. That all happens behind the scenes. What they do is they let us photograph them, interact with these guys, interview them, and a lot of the hockey media from around North America comes. A lot of the hockey news is there, ESPN. A lot of guys from Canada come down, and it's a real chance to talk to these guys for the first time since they've been drafted in some cases, or since they played last season if they did. And there's some names that resonate the most, like Macklin Celebrini being the number one pick, got a lot of attention, and people wanting to talk to him and get pictures with him and everything else. And then Josh Doan was the other big name. Shane Doan's son. He did play, I think, 10 or 11 games last year as a member of the Coyotes, and now he's in Utah with the new team, the Utah hockey team, and he wore the jersey for the first time, and people got to see it up close. In some cases, for the first time. The truth is, I saw the jersey at Fanatics Fest. It was actually there at the NHL booth. A lot of people didn't notice it, but it was there, and it was cool to talk to him about the jersey and what he thought of it, and about collecting cards. He had an interesting story. So all these guys kind of were casual collectors of cards as children. Like they bought packs, or they had friends who did, and there's a large Russian or European contingent of players, and a lot of them had never really done trading cards. But Josh Doan had, because he collected his father's teammates growing up, and he got cards for Christmas and Easter and a bunch of other holidays. So he was basically the only real collector of the bunch. The other ones were just really casual. And some of them were really interested in cards as a result of the showcase, because Upper Deck was there and they were signing autographs and they were opening packs the night before the dinner that the rookies had. So it was interesting. And the NHLPA president was there, and he basically said that having this connection between the sport and the hobby is good for both sides. And I have to agree with that. But overall, it was fun to cover it for Sports Collectors Digest, and I also had a piece for Puck Junk. So it was fun to do that. And I should point out, it's a private event. It's only open to the media. It's not open to the public. No fans were there. But the difference between this year and last year Connor Bedard was there, and so there was a lot more buzz, and there were actually people outside the facility looking for autographs because they knew Bedard was in the building. So a lot less hype, a lot less excitement this year compared to last year. But having said that, you just never know what rookies are going to really pan out in the end and which ones are not. And so, for all I know, Macklin Celebrini will be a better player than Connor Bedard. Maybe, I don't know. Connor Bedard has set a pretty high bar for a rookie. Last year, I think he had a good year. He put up the points. He won the Calder. So I think a lot of these guys want to aim to be better than him. In Josh Doan's case, he lives in the shadow of his father. And it's actually an interesting parallel, which is Shane Doan played like one season in Winnipeg and the team moved to Phoenix. And then, Josh Doan played basically part of a season in Phoenix, in Arizona, and then had to move the team to Utah. So he kind of joked about how like his team is cursed and how people are hoping one day his own son will, when he has a son in the future, nobody will draft him because that might mean your franchise is leaving the city. It's actually kind of funny. So, some of these guys, I will say, one last point is that for 18, 19, 20 years old, some of these guys are not even shaving. And I'm old enough now to be their father, which is scary to think, but also how mature and poised they are. I think if I was 18 years old and there were all these reporters like asking me questions all the time, I think I would be overwhelmed, and they were not. And so it's kind of, the maturity these guys have, and, is interesting. But the NHLPA president did tell us that during the rookie showcase, during that whole weekend, that whole week, really, they were bringing in accountants to give them financial advice. They were bringing domestic abuse counselors, like to help them. Like they want to prepare these young men for what will be a very, in some cases, trying time. You're going to be among men in the National Hockey League. You're going to have millions of dollars. Lots of people coming to you. So it's interesting. So there's a lot, it's a hobby component, but there's also a hockey and a human component. So it was just fun to be there.
That's really cool. So one thing I want to ask, I don't know if you know the answer to this or not. So they do a photo shoot, but I'm wondering for what purpose, because they always talk about how the cards have to picture the players in a game. Like by they, I mean like, well, that's what Upper Deck tends to do. I mean, I know like, yes, the Alexei Lafreniere was using that was a photo shoot photo. Some of the old young guns from like the 2010s and 2015 and stuff like that, they used photos from the rookie showcase, right? Like where they would just take a picture of the player skating around or skating or something. I'm curious, like, do you know if any of these photos that they took are like hockey card photos or are they just promotional photos? Or I'm just curious because like Upper Deck put out some photos on their Facebook page with like black backgrounds and like the players doing hockey stops. And I'm like, man, that would be a cool set. Like if that was their rookie class set, to me, that's way better than just an average game photo. Like a badass shot. It's the third time I've said badass in this podcast. I don't know if that counts for the swear jar.
That's for the bingo, for the people keeping home, keeping the bingo card at home. That's
Yeah, but like doing the hockey stop with the snow spraying, really well lit though, not like those minor league cards where like they were so dark you could hardly see the player on them. And so like I look at that and go, wow, those are great photos. That would make a great set of cards. So I'm just wondering, did they say what their intentions were for the pictures that they took?
well, you answer the question, I think, without knowing it, which is a lot of it is for marketing and promotion. And by marketing and promotion, they mean like we put it on Instagram, we put it on social media. So that's part of it. I want to say that the Easter egg card of Bedard might have been taken either at the draft night or maybe at the photo shoot. So that's possible. A lot of it were headshots. Now, last year, part of the photo shoot we could see it. This year we couldn't see it. Like it was behind closed doors. Last year it was kind of in the open, and we just couldn't take photos while they were being photographed. They were told us don't take photos while they're in front of a curtain
Mm-hmm.
or a green screen or whatever they were doing. But a lot of it is meant, like for example, if Celebrini is going to be on the cover of, let's say, Extended or in Series 2, they would use a photo from this shoot, for example, and not an ice one, because a lot of it is headshots or a lot of it is, and then they shot a lot of video because they used some of that video for online, and so a lot of it is online, and a lot of it is these guys are going to get together anyway because the league, not the league, but the player association is doing this anyway. And so Upper Deck is basically piggybacking off of this event, and it helps both sides. So you're right, like that ice spraying thing isn't going to be a card set, but it also gets the rookies in the mood for, camp and everything else. And some of these guys have signed with their teams, but some of them probably haven't yet, and so some of them spoke hypothetically like, oh, I hope I have a good season. I hope I end up on the roster, you know?
Mhm.
So I mean, most of them are, the draft picks were signed, most of them signed over the summer. But yeah, no, there's no special set that's coming as a result of this. A lot of it is marketing, and marketing online, and goes a long way. And you have to have these guys in one place at one time, and seeing all these guys on the ice at the same time and skating around in different jerseys, it's just really interesting, really cool. And some of these guys know each other. Like one really interesting storyline I thought was like Matt Rempe was in DC again after they were eliminated last year. He was back in Washington, and I will say he's a big boy. Like he is, he could play center for the Knicks. I mean, he's big. And and then when we interviewed him, they asked him about his fighting. He was like, "Look, I spent most of the summer basically trying to become a better skater." He goes, "Fighting will just happen. Like I'm not going to train for fighting." He goes, "And I'll do it when I have to." And someone asked him a question about when you were in the minors, like you only fought this much and no more. And he's like, "That's because they have a cap. Like I can only fight 7 times or something during the course of a season." So he goes, I did it every time I could. So it was interesting to talk to different players, and different players were made available. Not all of them were made available, and not everyone in the media wanted to talk to everybody. The people that got the most attention, I have to be honest, was Celebrini, because he was the number 1 pick, and Josh Doan. Those were the two that, and Josh went last. So everyone kind of hung around waiting and waiting and waiting. And then at one point, he took his jersey off, the Utah jersey, and he was just going to do the interview, like, with the suspenders and the pants. He was all dressed, but and the NHLPA guy was like, "Put the jersey back on." And I said, "Yeah, we all want to get a picture of him with the jersey on. We don't want to get a picture of him like looking like he just, finished the game." And then he talked about the jersey, and the jersey was pretty cool, I will say, for a team with no name. I will say it was pretty cool, and a pretty cool jersey. And the Fanatics jerseys looked good, like compared to the baseball ones. The names were not smaller, the numbers were not smaller, the logos were great. It didn't look like they're going to get weird or discolored or anything. Like the baseball ones have been a disaster, we know that, but
Mhm.
Fanatics learned from the baseball ones. Let's not mess with these too much. And the Fanatics logo will be on everything. I'm curious to see if when Upper Deck captures them on cards, whether or not they'll pick photos that are not showing the Fanatics logo, because the Fanatics logo is on the jerseys. So we shall see. Well, Series 2 we'll see that. Series 1 we won't see that yet, but Series 2 we will.
Yeah, it's a good point because Fanatics makes Topps cards, but they're not really competitors because Fanatics doesn't make hockey cards. So Upper Deck makes hockey cards, Fanatics makes non-hockey cards. So I guess if like there was a Fanatics logo on a jersey, I mean, yeah, we know Fanatics owns Topps, Topps makes trading cards, but I think maybe that's a little too far like removed. You know what I mean? It's not the same as there being like a Topps logo on the jersey or something. But then even then, like I said, they're not their competitors, right? It's not like in the 90s when Upper Deck would put their uh advertising, they would pay to advertise on the boards at hockey games, particularly by the nets, because they knew that's where the action was. And then you had companies like Topps where they would like they'd use a photo of a hockey player and there'd be like an Upper Deck logo in like the background on the boards that they would have to, either airbrush, or sometimes the background was blurry enough or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. That is interesting though. I'm not a big fan of logos on like these advertising logos on the jerseys. Just
Yeah, yeah.
it's bringing us closer to soccer, right? Like we
Well,
have
the
these
soccer
singular
team,
names, and now we have sponsor logos on the jerseys.
yeah, the NBA, which is very much into the NBA commissioner, loves soccer so much that not only they have the logos now, but they created a second cup competition to be more like English soccer. And I can see how the NHL might want to do, because in Europe, the European hockey leagues have. I mean, I've seen jerseys in Europe where it looked like a race car driver. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Like, there's a lot going on. But Fanatics' deal is with the NHL, and Upper Deck's deals with the NHLPA. So I wouldn't be totally surprised if the Fanatics logo got airbrushed in Series 2. And I'm going to look for that because that would be a big middle finger to Fanatics if Upper Deck did that. Now, Upper Deck doesn't strike me as the kind of company that would do it. I can see Fanatics doing it to Upper Deck, but not the other way around. So I don't, you know, but it's up to them. And the Players Union probably would support it because they don't care about Fanatics. They don't have a deal with them.
Right, but Upper Deck also has a deal with the NHL. The cards are licensed by the NHL and the NHLPA.
So they wouldn't want to piss off the league.
Right. So, like, I mean, there's a lot of hockey cards that I look at and I go, man, this would be a great card if it wasn't for that stupid ad on the board that's distracting.
Right.
But they don't airbrush it out. We ran an interview with an Upper Deck photo editor a few years back, definitely pre-pandemic. And one of the things that they said was, you know, the only retouching we'll do is sometimes like we might remove a beer from somebody's hand in the audience if it's like really obvious, you know, like, but
And they're not fans of blood, like on jerseys either.
they would either remove that or they would maybe not use that photo. Personally, I would like less logos and ads everywhere. I don't mind like the CCM logos because that's hockey, or like the stick logos because that's hockey. You know what I mean? Like you see like the name of the stick on the stick, and that's part of the game. But like the Washington Capitals having a TikTok logo on the shoulder or on the chest of their road jerseys. I mean, dude, that is total barf. I'm sorry.
You got to pay the bills.
Well, yes, and I get it. It's another revenue stream, but oh my god, like at what point do you stop seeing hockey and all you see is ads?
Right. I mean, you see it on the ice already and on the board. I mean, a lot of it is all like you see it on the screens at home. It could be too much, I agree, but because we've been around a while and we watched games in the 80s where it was very sparse. And so I get it, but I also understand younger people don't even notice it. They think it's normal. So it's jarring to us. Also, another point on the logo is so small on a card that I don't know that you would see the Fanatics logo that well anyway. It's even smaller than the Nike swoosh, so I don't know that you would see it. So it could be that they just don't care and they ignore it. But I'm sure it's coming. It'll come up or someone will mention it. I mean, we're mentioning it here, so it's possible. So we'll see that in Series 2 because Series 1 photos will be primarily from last season because there isn't enough time to turn it around. But otherwise, we shall see. And then we'll see. I guess there won't be any Utah players in, you know, in Series 1. It's too early for a checklist, but at some point we'll get a checklist and they did that with the Kraken, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't think Series 1 had any Kraken players. I think they were all put in, maybe there were a couple in Series 2 and then a bunch in Extended Series. Upper Deck Series 1 is coming out at the end of October. So yeah, they're not going to have any of the players in the new Utah jerseys. That would definitely be a Series 2 or Extended Series for sure kind of thing. And it is funny. We could do a separate show on that, but like how hockey card companies have dealt with like teams relocating.
No, I will say if Josh Doan has a good year and ends up in extended, this could be the first year ever extended series means something. So I'm looking forward to that. If that's
Right. Yeah. Good point. Yeah.
So
Although they could probably put them in Series 2. I mean, they could.
probably, but Celebrini will be in Series 2, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's good. And I like them kind of splitting out the young guns, the good young guns over like the holdovers in Series 1. Okay, fine. That's what it is. It is what it is. Then Series 2 and Extended Series, and then it gives people motivation to buy Series 2 and Extended Series. And I want that because I want the set to be 700 cards.
Technically, Josh Doan could have been in Series 1 had they stayed in Arizona. Because they're not in Arizona and they're now in Utah, they have to, unless he shows up in an Arizona jersey, which would be really weird in Series 1, which would be very, very weird. I think that's not going to be the case. I'm sure the league will put, because the league doesn't want the NHL, the Upper Deck and the league don't want to have Arizona anywhere anymore.
Right.
They want to move on from that.
Right.
So and they're not doing the airbrush job. They're not doing anything like that. So I can see them. So maybe it's just fortuitous that because the team moved and a player got hot later, it works out for the collectors. But I hope so, because I agree with you to spread them out more and to make extended worth more and be more meaningful, because extended has become, I know we talk about that a lot on the show, it's become kind of a useless product and very cheap ultimately, because nobody wants it. So
Yeah.
it all works out.
All right. So any last thoughts before we wrap this one up? Because this has been quite a show.
It's been good. Looking forward to, preseason is upon us. So if not soon enough. So, before you know it, it'll be hockey season.
Yeah, and it'll be cold again, and it'll go from 95 degrees back to 60 degrees and rainy like Clemente wants to 10 degrees like none of us want.
Well, I should say what I want now, but then I'll complain about it when it happens. So.
Yeah, of course. All right, folks. Well, thank you for listening to the Puck Junk Hockey Podcast. As always, if you've enjoyed the show, please be sure to like and subscribe. Please give us a follow on social media. Clemente is at Clemente Lisi. I'm at Puck Junk. You can also subscribe to the Puck Junk newsletter at puckjunk.com/newsletter. And until next time, collect what you like.
For more hockey goodness, follow us on Twitter at Puck Junk.